Welcome to MAHZEN. Before we begin tonight's terrifying journey, take a quick moment to look around your room. Make sure your doors are locked and your windows are tightly shut. If you love true, bone-chilling horror stories and want to support the channel, please hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications. It really helps a new channel like MAHZEN grow, and you won't miss a single nightmare. Now, sit back, turn off the lights, and let's dive into our first story.
Back in late 2023, I began seeing a man in my neighborhood walking his dog. I would see him in the morning when I went to work, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. He was an average-looking guy, maybe in his 60s. I would see him again regularly when I came home. Since I worked an 8 to 5 job, I didn't think much of it, and just assumed that we had overlapping schedules. He always wore the same blue jacket. I didn't think much of it because it looked like a rain or wind jacket, so I just thought it's what he threw on to walk the dog. He would stare a lot when he walked by, but again assumed he was just a lonely guy, and didn't think too much of it. One day I asked him if he had gotten the end-of-year letter from the Homeowners Association, and he seemed confused. I repeated myself, and he said he hadn't received anything yet. I wrote this off as well because I assumed he was caught off guard. I had been seeing him daily for months, but we never spoke. He genuinely seemed shocked by our interaction. I told him to keep a lookout for it, and he just stared blankly and then resumed walking his golden retriever. I began seeing more of him after this. By Christmas, I was seeing him at least once a day, if not twice, and always gave a quick, neighborly wave whenever I saw him walking his dog. In March, I separated from my husband. He moved out and took the dog. He owned him before I came along, so I understood. Since I was now alone and sad, my mom stayed with me for a while. She doesn't work, so she would be at my house during the day while I was gone. Then she noted the same guy always walking by. She noticed he always stared too, and it was kind of odd. She waved hello and said hi to him a few times, but he never did anything but stare and walk his dog. She said since he walked the dog often, but also seemingly on a schedule, he could have early onset dementia, or maybe was sick perhaps, and using the dog walks as a way to get exercise. We agreed he was very odd but harmless all the same. And after a month or so, my mom went back to her house, and I was once again living alone. Now, one thing I loved about that house was the fact that the backyard uttered up to the national park. Beyond my fence were trees and forests. After my husband and dog left, I would be sitting in the backyard and hear what sounded like footsteps. It was almost always late at night when I'd be sneaking out for a late-night cigarette before bed. I was drinking a good amount of the time too, so I figured 1, I was paranoid, or 2, I was probably hearing raccoons or possums in the woods, or maybe 3, having the dog before would have scared off any critters. It didn't happen every night, far enough apart that I was able to write it off. But all the same, I couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. My fence had horizontal planks rather than your more standard vertical ones. There were gaps that you could see through if you were right on it. I looked over the fence in the daylight for a sign of someone being back there. The National Forest kept the fire break cleared between the edge of the park and the back of the homeowner's property, so it was difficult to tell if anyone had been there or not. I started noticing lighters and cigarettes missing from the backyard. I would swear I had an almost full pack going to bed. When I checked the next day, it would be half empty, and I wrote this off due to my heavy drinking. My cousin started coming over and helping me do some handiwork around the house on the weekends. The neighbor guy in the blue coat would walk his dog every day still, and he would now stop and watch my cousins from the sidewalk as they helped with the housework. He would let the leash out for the dog to come up to them, but they didn't pet it because it smelled awful. I told them Mom's theory, said he was sick and weird and harmless, but they didn't agree. The next time he let the dog into the driveway, my cousin told him to get lost. From what they told me, he just stared at them for a while and then walked on. From then the man would still stare, and it was creepier. When I would drive by, he would stop and watch me, as in physically turning his body to follow my car as I went by. I would wave, as if it were any other neighbor, as I always did, and he didn't flinch. Around June, a friend of mine moved in. She was going through a divorce as well, and I was happy to have someone to hang out with after work. We had a lot of fun drinking and burning fires in the fire pit, and it began again. The sound of footsteps in the woods. We were both drunk, so we ran inside and laughed it off. This happened a handful of times over the next few months. I would hear things more often when I was alone. My roommate split her time, so she was never with me on the weekend. She had noted the creepy guy with the dog. He seemed to be walking his dog whenever I left for work around 7:30, and again when she was leaving for work at 8:30. He would let his dog out to do her daily, and she would pet the dog at first. But then she stopped because the dog smelled so bad and the man never spoke. She started being creeped out too. She said he seemed friendly enough until she stopped petting his dog, and his stare shifted to being mean. Then one day, I saw it. I saw him down out past the entrance of the neighborhood, under the tree line to the forest. He was clearly walking into the woods. That's when it clicked. Why he seemed to be there with his dog every day we left the house. Why did they smell so bad? Why was I hearing things in the woods? I almost began to panic. Surely, a man isn't living in the woods behind my house watching me. Surely this man hasn't been watching me through my fence for almost a year at this point. The whole time this was happening, the house next door was empty. It was a rental, and the previous tenants left, and it sat. I started thinking back, and I began seeing the man sometimes after the previous tenants moved out. I tried best not to panic, and started looking into trail cameras to film beyond my fence. I told my roommate about my theory, and she said it sounded crazy at first. She jokingly started yelling out for him to go away and leave us alone. Then we literally started hearing footsteps in the woods at that moment and ran inside. Before I could even order a camera, they rented the house next door. It was just days after I told my roommate what I thought was going on. The family with a dog and 2 kids moved in. The last time I saw the man walking his dog was the morning the family moved in, because I came home from work to see the moving truck. When I introduced myself to the new neighbors, I asked about the woods behind the house because they didn't have a fence. I asked if they found anything back there, and they said they did, but it was just random junk they threw out. I didn't say any more. I just contemplated telling them, but figured I would sound insane. I believe this man was living behind their house and watching me through my fence. I never had cameras in the backyard, so I can't say for certain if he ever crossed the fence, since I never saw him again. I decided his cover was blown, and he moved on to watch other people. I stayed in that home until October of 2025, and literally never saw the guy again after that day. When I was little, every few years my family would go back to my mom's hometown, and we'd camp there for about a week or so during the summer. This would be when I was on summer break. And this place, Edgewood, is a pretty small town that has a population of between 200 to 250 people, give or take. I was in a very rural part of the province, surrounded by forest, and rather out of the way, with a close-knit community of people who all knew each other. My mom and stepdad and 3-year-old sister stayed at our family friend's house to visit. But as soon as I sat down, my mom told me to take the dog for a walk, and gave me $5 to take with me to the convenience store along the way, so that I could get an ice cream or a drink, which I was thrilled with, so off I went. The walk to the store was pretty uneventful. The town is incredibly small and practically everything was within walking distance. The convenience store was about a 5-minute walk away, so I didn't have a hard time finding my way there. Once I bought my Pepsi, I went ahead and sat outside in the front of the store in the shade, taking a moment to sip my drink before heading back into the house. That's when a blue car pulled up. I wasn't in the area often, so I didn't recognize anyone. I met a few family friends of my mom's who would take us to visit every once in a while, and the person in the car rolled down their window and looked up over at me, offering a smile and a wave. She looked rather unkempt, and appeared to be in what I could only assume was her mid-50s. She was dirty, her hair was messy, and her car was covered in rusty spots, with cracked and damaged windows. I glanced up, offering a polite smile, and went back to my drink. It wasn't uncommon for people to be friendly in that community, so for the most part I didn't think anything of it. She called out to me, "Hey there, what's your name?" I looked up again, a bit hesitant to say anything. I was a bit shy around new folks. Kayla, I answered, not saying much else. I did get taught about stranger danger, but given this town was very small and tight-knit, it didn't cross my mind at the time and I assumed I was safe. "Whoa, Kayla, I've got this makeup here and you can have it if you want. I think you look beautiful with this makeup. Do you want to come and try it on? I can help you put it on." Now was what made the first siren go off in my head. I shook my head, telling her, "No, that's okay. I don't wear makeup." I was a 3'10" and very tomboyish. I never had an interest in makeup, and from a stranger, even less so. I was getting uncomfortable. I'm getting up to leave when she was insistent on getting me at least to give it a try. I kept saying no and proceeded to start walking away when she offered something else. "Well, what about a muffin? I've got these muffins that are too good to keep to myself. I've got a bunch in the back if you want to come and take one." That was siren number 2. I knew 2 things about walking around by myself anywhere. 1, don't ever take food or candy from a stranger. 2, don't ever get into a van, a car, or a truck, or any vehicle with someone I didn't know. I said no again, and explained that my family was waiting for me. She looked annoyed at this point and insisted again. "Well, I can drive you back, but you just need to get in the car." She was snapping at me at this point and I was already reasonably rattled. I didn't say anything else and instead hurried off with my dog, hastily enough to where I forgot to even take my Pepsi with me. I don't know why, but something in my head told me not to lead this woman to the house my family was at. So instead, they walked off the campsite, which was about another 5 minutes away. I figured she wouldn't have any reason to follow me to a campsite that likely had other people there, in case she was going to try anything. But of course, here's where I was wrong. The campsite was particularly empty that day, and not really monitored by anyone, so this was probably the dumbest idea I could have had. I walked along the path that had led me to the road full of campsite lots, and sure enough, one glance behind me sent chills down my spine and my stomach sank. The woman was following me in her car. She was a good 10 to 15 meters away, but was keeping pace with me like she was waiting for me to stop. I panicked, picked up my dog, and walked a bit faster down the road to see if I could get anyone's attention and ask for help. In my panic, I found one man who was setting up his campsite, and I ran to him as fast as I could. I desperately tried to explain what was happening, and I was on the verge of tears, explaining that someone who tried to get me into their car was following me. He hummed and eventually said, "Sorry, I've got my dog with me. I can't leave it here for long. I hope you find your way back," and left me on my own in tears. I begged him one more time, but his answer never changed. I looked behind me and noticed the blue car was gone. I thought maybe that she'd given up, or didn't want to be seen, but either way, I took this opportunity to sprint away again, desperately looking for somewhere that would let me sneak back to the house off the main campsite road. Off the side of the road there was a very thick array of bushes. I picked up my dog once again and ran off into the brush, until I was far enough away and hidden enough from the road. I held my dog tight and patiently waited to see if a car would drive by, watching through the bushes. A few minutes passed, and sure enough there she was, driving by again slowly, almost like she was looking for something. Once she drove off, I wanted to make a break for it, but something told me to stay right where I was. Another few minutes passed by, and the car was back. She had looped around, driving agonizingly slowly. And that wasn't the first time she looped around. She did this more times than I can even recall. I stopped counting at some point. At the final loop, I saw her park her car down the road a goodish 40 meters behind where I was hiding. As she got out, she began walking down the road like she was looking for something, obviously me. I was practically petrified. I laid there for God knows how long waiting as she walked down the road. Eventually I heard her mumble something or swear at the end of the sentence before she walked back up to her car. She hit the hood of her car before going back in and speeding off. I waited another half hour give or take before I finally plucked up the courage to grab my dog and run as fast as I could back to the house. By the time I'd gotten there, my legs were shaking and I could barely stand. My lungs were on fire, and I was on the verge of tears again. My mum came out and scolded me for taking so long, asking why I was gone for as long as I was. And I broke out in tears, explaining to her what exactly happened and how I was followed and looked for at least an hour. She shrugged and explained, no one here would do anything like that. I went back inside. Our family friend James pulled me aside and asked me to describe the woman in the car. He said, we know a lot of people here in town. I might know who you're referring to. I told him everything I saw, and he hummed, glancing up while he pondered what he recalled about people he knew in town. Yeah, I don't know anyone with a comment like that in here. I'll ask around, see if anyone knows who you're talking about. The rest of the evening was pretty uneventful, but I stayed inside and didn't leave the house. Refused to, in fact. James eventually pulled my mum aside to talk to her, but I didn't hear their conversation. The remainder of the trip was otherwise calm. But for the rest of our time in town, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without my mum or stepdad. And any time I had to take the dog for a walk, one of them always came with me. I don't think I was ever alone again during that trip, excluding when I needed to use the washroom. Whatever James told my mum, I want to say that it got her to take me seriously. I don't think anyone ever found out who the woman was. And honestly, I'd rather never find out. This story happened to me a few years ago when I was around 14 years old. At the time, I wanted to make a little bit of money for myself. I figured the easiest way to do that was by selling some of my old toys on Facebook Marketplace. I had a pretty large Lego Harry Potter collection, but wasn't really into Harry Potter anymore, so I decided to sell it. A few days later, that buyer contacted me. I remember feeling really excited because I was about to make my first real money on my own. The buyer was a man who looked kind of old, but from his profile picture he seemed nice enough. He told me he wanted to buy the Lego for his grandson, which honestly made the whole thing seem pretty wholesome. But as we started messaging, a few things felt off. Whenever I asked him questions about when he could pick up the Lego, he would leave me on scene and not reply. Sometimes he wouldn't answer until I sent multiple question marks. On top of that, he made a lot of grammatical mistakes, like the kind of mistakes a high schooler might make, not a full-grown adult. At the time I thought it was weird but ignored it. Eventually we agreed to meet. I don't remember exactly if it was Wednesday or Thursday, but I remember I had school the next day, and he said he wanted to pick them up that night. I gave him the address of the bookstore about a 10-minute walk away from my house. That way I wouldn't have to give him my actual home address. He wanted to meet at 8:30 p.m. Looking back on it now, that's obviously really late for a 14-year-old to meet a stranger. But at the time I just wanted the money, so agreed. But still, something in my gut told me not to go alone. My dad was away on a business trip at the time, so I asked my mum if she could accompany me. She immediately asked if I could reschedule the meeting with the man. I told her it would be fine and that he seemed nice, and so she agreed to come. We drove to the bookstore, but my mum didn't want the man to see our car, so she parked about 5 minutes away and we walked the rest. I had the Lego pieces in my jacket pocket because I didn't want to carry them in my hands. As we were walking towards the bookstore, something immediately caught my attention. Standing in front of the store was a man. He looked middle-aged, perhaps older, but right away I noticed something strange. He didn't look like the man in the profile picture at all. The man in the profile picture had long, grey hair. But this guy was skinny and had a buzz cut. I'm wearing a sling bag across his chest. Before we crossed the street, my mum stopped me. She told me to text the man and say that I was already inside the bookstore. She had a bad feeling and didn't want me going near him, so I did exactly that. As we walked past the man, I hid my phone so I wouldn't see that I was texting. I sent the message saying I was already inside the store and asked if he could come in. Almost immediately he replied and told me to come outside, and kept insisting. At this point it was really dark out and barely anyone was around. The only reason I could have seen him clearly was because of the nearby streetlight. I messaged him again and told him I wasn't going out. Even though I was actually walking away towards the car, I wanted him to think I was still inside the bookstore. Then he sent me another message, simply called me an idiot and added a laughing emoji. That message honestly freaked me out. It felt like he knew something was off. As soon as my mum and I got back to the car, we drove away. On the way home, she told me to delete my marketplace account and block the man immediately. Then when I got home, I thanked my mum for coming with me. She told me I should never meet someone that late again. But the story doesn't end there. Around the same time, one of my friends was also selling Lego figures on Marketplace. He was a little older than me, maybe 16. I told him about the whole situation, but never told him the name of the man. Halfway through the story, my friend suddenly said a name and asked, "Wait, was it this guy?" I was completely shocked. I asked him how he knew. Then he showed me screenshots of a conversation he had with the buyer. It was the same man, and he was texting my friend the exact same story, that he wanted to buy the Lego figures for his grandson. My friend immediately messaged him and said someone had already bought the figures, and that wasn't true. He just didn't want to deal with the guy anymore. After that, neither of us heard from the man again. I don't know what he's doing now, but my gut feeling tells me that whoever the man was, he definitely was up to something shady.
Thank you for listening to tonight's stories until the very end. If these real encounters gave you chills, please show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing to MAHZEN, and sharing this video with a friend who loves horror. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 3 stories terrified you the most? And if you were the security guard in the final story, would you have looked up at the rafters? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Stay safe out there and sleep with one eye open. Until next week.